Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we read 1 Chronicles chapter 24. And it was an adventure.
Yeah.
This was one of those chapters I let my eyes fall on every word and every name that I can't pronounce.
That's right. So let me tell you why this chapter is important. Remember, who wrote the book of 1 Chronicles?
Ezra.
Ezra wrote it. And when did he write it? He wrote it before the exile or after the exile? After. So all the exiles are coming back into the land, and while Ezra is there, Ezra is working on kind of motivating them all to rebuild the temple. Nehemiah is rebuilding the wall, and together they are reestablishing their society. Well, if they're going to have a functioning temple, then who are the people that are going to work there? It's going to be the Levites and the priests. Now, here, remember back a few weeks ago, Orville, you remember this? Remember back a few weeks ago, whenever we were reading through Ezra, there were a couple of chapters where it said that some Levites came back into the city, but they could not trace their heritage back, and they were not allowed to be priests or Levites. Now, here's what you need to know. God is gracious in that those people were not sent away from the kingdom, but everything was precise in that they were not allowed to serve as a priest in that role. Chapter number 24 shows us that the priests were to take great concern in confirming who was and was not supposed to be doing this. This was a precise kind of process. I also remember this. They're not trying to be difficult, and they're not trying to exclude. They're trying to be right. Matter of fact, there was a guy named Michael Wilcock. He wrote it like this. He said the chroniclers concerned themselves with being right. He wants to show the preparation of Israel for Solomon's reign not only as a historical fact, but as a matter of spiritual truth and a correct and legitimate process. So the list of returning exiles shows where the Levites historically will fit into it. And it's interesting because not a single name is missed. And there are a few details here that I found to be pretty important. Like verse number 2. It says, and Nadab and Abihu died before their father and had no children. Therefore, Eleazar and Ithamar ministered as priests. Now, this is a fallback to an ancient story. So the Israelites came out of Egypt. They were set up. Aaron was the high priest, and his sons would serve as priests under him. Well, one day, Nadab and Abihu, two of the sons of Aaron, were going about their work, and they brought foreign fire, which means they would burn incense in the temple, but they were only supposed to do it a certain way. They kind of took a little cheat, a little quick pass, a little shortcut in how they served the Lord, and they died. Like this was a big deal, and so everybody in the community went, "Oh my goodness, this is very serious," and it is. And so the temple service was so serious that two priests who died while doing it are mentioned here to remind people of all these things. Matter of fact, look in verse number 3. It says, and David with Zadok. Now you need to see these words. David with Zadok of the sons of Eleazar, priests, and Ahimelech of the sons of Ithamar, divided them according to the schedule of their service. So, David assigned all these Levites the different ministries and roles that they would have. But how did he do it? He did it in conjunction, in consultation with people that were already doing it, with established leaders. And he used those people who knew what they were doing to carry out the administration of the work. It's a great piece of leadership style here that says the one guy doesn't have to be in charge. What he does have to do, though, is get knowledgeable people around him to try to do the right thing. Can I tell you this? When I was, and I always think about this story when I read stuff like this. When I was a kid, I had a little part-time job. And in that part-time job, I had to interact with people. It was one of my favorite jobs I ever had. And I met there a very, very rich man. Now, I don't know how rich he was, but I'm telling you, I don't know if I've ever known anybody richer. And so, like, I may just be making that up, but I know he's very wealthy. So one day I'm talking to him, and I'm like 15, you know. I'm talking to this guy, and and we're talking about success. And I don't even know how we got there. But the guy told me, he said, he stopped what he's doing. I'm working, and I stop, and he looks at me and he goes, hey, listen, if you want to be successful in life, then find somebody who is already successful at what you want to do and what you want to be, and just do what they do. Because they've already figured it out. They already know what to do. They already know what not to do. So just do what they do, and you'll get their result. And listen, I could probably poke a lot of holes into that, but the premise of it has always stuck with me. And what I like about David here is David's not a priest. He's a king. So when he's fitting together how all these priests will work, you know what he does? He brings in priests who knew how it all went down. And he goes, all right, guys, let's settle down. And if you had to design this process, what would you do? Can I tell you what? It's great to have people who've already got it figured out around you. The other thing I want you to see is look at the very last verse of this. It's talking about how they were all assigned their responsibilities. And it says, the chief fathers, the last sentence of the text, the chief fathers did just as their younger brethren. So a couple of things to note there is Ezra seems concerned that all of these people know that they belong and that they know where they belong. And in this process, it talks about all of these guys who were in charge and all the guys who we don't hear their names because they were just worker bees. But this last sentence says, the chief fathers did just as their younger brethren. So everybody followed the same process and was held to the same standard. From leader to the guy we never heard of, everybody was on equal footing. Can I tell you this? The longer I've read the book of First Chronicles, and I read a great quote about this a couple of days ago. When we pray for revival, when we pray for God to move, I typically will pray for preachers and evangelists and missionaries and things like that. But somebody pointed out to me recently as I read, said when we pray for revival and we're looking at the Chronicles, then we also need to be praying for the workers. Not just the preachers, not just the teachers, not just the missionaries. But what about the guy who vacuums? What about the guy who sings? What about the guy who plays the instrument? What about the lady who prays? Because Chronicles tells us that yes, there are a lot of leaders, but these people, just that we don't even know their name, they're incredibly important to this process. I just need you to know, when you read this, you fit somewhere into the work of God. Find where you're supposed to be and know you are incredibly valuable. So serve the Lord and love Him with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. All right, we'll see you next time in chapter number 25. Bye.
Bye.